When Netflix's Monster: The Ed Gein Story premiered, audiences were both horrified and fascinated by its depiction of the infamous Butcher of Plainfield. The show paints Gein as a truly disturbed murderer whose crimes inspired decades of horror cinema, from Psycho to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to Silence of the Lambs. But while the series is gripping, much of what viewers see is not entirely true. As with most dramatizations, Monster blends facts and fiction to heighten tension and keep audiences glued to their screens. Here are 10 major differences between the show's version of Ed Gein and the grim reality behind the myth. Number 1, the body count. In Monster, Gein is portrayed as a prolific serial killer responsible for numerous murders across Wisconsin. In truth, police only ever confirmed 2 murders: tavern owner Mary Hogan and hardware store owner Bernice Warden. The rest of the human remains found in his home were taken from local graveyards, not murder victims. The show exaggerates the death toll to make him fit the mold of a classic slasher villain. Number 2, necrophilia and sexual deviance. The series strongly implies that Gein engaged in necrophilia, but there's no concrete evidence of that. During questioning, Gein himself denied any sexual acts with corpses, claiming the bodies were used for experiments and souvenirs. Investigators at the time never confirmed otherwise, though they found many disturbing artifacts in his home. Number 3, weapons of choice. Dramatic scenes show Gein wielding a chainsaw or cleaver, carving through his victims like a monster out of a horror film. In real life, both confirmed murders were carried out with a single rifle. There's no evidence Gein ever used a chainsaw in any crime. That detail likely came from the influence his crimes later had on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Number 4, the love interest, Adeline Watkins. In Monster, Adeline Watkins is portrayed as a tragic romantic figure, someone who understands Gein, even sympathizes with him. In reality, Watkins' involvement is questionable. Some reports say she was a local acquaintance who exaggerated her connection after his arrest. There's no record of her being his partner, confidant, or accomplice. Number 5, crossing paths with Ted Bundy. One of the more bizarre moments in Monster shows Gein interacting with Ted Bundy in a fictionalized killer correspondence. Historically, this never happened. The 2 men lived in different areas and locations. This crossover exists purely for thematic flair, a creative way to tie Monster into a larger shared universe of serial killer stories. Number 6, rewritten victims. The series sometimes merges or swaps traits of Gein's real victims. For example, Bernice Warden and Mary Hogan's personalities are altered to build tension and contrast their relationships with Gein. These dramatizations humanize them for television, but they deviate from how the women actually lived and died. Number 7, serial killer label. Though Gein is often described as one of America's first serial killers, technically, he doesn't fit the definition, which requires 3 or more murders over separate events. His case was more about grave robbing and psychological obsession than serial homicide. Still, pop culture solidified him as the prototype for cinematic killers. Number 8, crossdressing and the woman suit. The real Gein did make masks and garments from female corpses, but Monster portrays him as regularly wearing them around the house. even adopting female personas. In truth, there's no evidence he lived his daily life that way. Those behaviors were exaggerated to emphasize the disturbing visual legacy that later inspired characters like Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. Number 9, the death of his brother. One major scene shows Gein murdering his brother Henry during a suspicious house fire or field fire. Historically, Henry's death was ruled accidental, though investigators found his body oddly unburned. There was never enough proof to charge Ed. The show reframes it as Gein's first taste of murder, a dramatic but unverified leap. Number 10, pop culture conversations. In Monster's surreal sequences, Gein converses with figures like Alfred Hitchcock and fictional filmmakers, as if aware of his coming pop culture infamy. Of course, that's completely fictional. These moments serve as symbolic commentator, illustrating how Gein's prime crimes became the foundation for modern horror. In conclusion, the real Ed Gein, well, he was far less of a Hollywood monster and more of a deeply broken man, isolated, traumatized, and shaped by religious fanaticism and mental illness. His crimes were shocking, yes, but his legacy endures largely because filmmakers magnified them into myth. Monster, the Ed Gein story, captures that mythic side powerfully. But as with any dramatization, the truth is far less cinematic and far more disturbing.